I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner. Here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
The Select Committee on Synthetic Drugs made its recommendations this week. State Representative Erik Simonson of Duluth chaired the committee, and he's here to talk about the report.
Well, the 36th annual Atmore Memorial Ski Race in Duluth is bringing Olympic-level athletes to Spirit Mountain this weekend.
And we'll have the week's top business stories and learn about an important milestone from 25 years ago in our news file story.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. Julie, I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be too sorry to see January in the rearview mirror.
I would suspect that you're right. It was a brutal one.
Oh, December cold, January cold. Let's see what February brings. Huh?
Should be some good stuff.
Okay, well, we've got a busy evening. Might as well get started.
All right, thank you, Denny, and welcome everyone. Following more than 6 months of hearings and investigation, a House committee dealing with the synthetic drug problem in Minnesota has made its recommendations. Those proposals have been forwarded to the House Speaker for legislative consideration in the upcoming session. Joining us now is the chair of the committee, Representative Erik Simonson, a DFLer from Duluth, and welcome back.
Thanks, Julie.
Appreciate you coming in. Now, we've heard so much about the synthetic drug problem here in Duluth, but as you traveled around gathering testimony, is the rest of the state seeing similar issues?
Well, you know, they actually are. It's just that here in Duluth it seems to be multiplied many times over because of the media attention on the last place on earth. But anywhere that we went, essentially, and heard testimony, we find that synthetic drugs are prevalent in many communities.
Are we making any headway at all, Erik, statewide in the fight against synthetic drugs? You know, the Duluth issue has certainly brought a lot of media attention statewide.
Right.
So has that helped?
It has helped, and actually, you know, good things are happening across Minnesota even prior to this legislation that we're going to consider. For example, there was a successful case just recently prosecuted up in Roseau County against synthetic drugs with a very successful outcome. So things are happening, and prosecutors and law enforcement are working well together, and,
yeah.
And our analog laws that are on the books now are good laws. It's just that we need to speed it up a little bit.
As you were traveling around and heard from people around the state, any recurring themes or really compelling stories that made you just know in your gut that it's time to do something and take this problem seriously?
Well, if there's one thing that we heard consistently, it's just the compelling story of the damage that these things do to individuals and to families. And you heard that over and over and over again. And you can't sit through that too often without really realizing that, you know, something really needs to change here.
Your committee is looking at 9 separate steps to try to strengthen things. And one of them, I understand, is the definition of drugs, that you want to allow the pharmaceutical companies or the pharmaceutical agencies to define. Was part of the problem here in Duluth definition of what the drug is?
Well, I don't know if it was part of the problem. Really what we're trying to create with our recommendations is a faster moving process. So we're proposing to expand the definition of drug to include synthetic drugs. And then at the same time, one of the other recommendations is giving the Minnesota State Board of Pharmacy the authority to go in and issue a cease and desist order for these things.
So whatever the pharmaceutical board would then say is pretty much a recommendation to legal authorities. Is that how that would work?
Well, they would have the authority to issue a cease and desist for selling those particular products. And then, of course, the legal path would continue on as it normally would.
But backed by the legislature.
Backed by the legislature, yep.
Are there any specific recommendations that you could talk about that provide tools that would help law enforcement on the street?
Well, we think that particular tool is a great one because, as an example, and something that will resonate with folks, is that if we had had this law on the books when Last Place on Earth opened, or when they started finding out about what they were selling, we could have brought the Board of Pharmacy in, identified the products as a drug under the new definition, and they could have issued a cease and desist order. Okay, and that would have stopped the over-the-counter sale of synthetic drugs for the whole period of time between the time that charges were filed until he was convicted, which of course was many, many months, and as we know, over $6 million worth of products sold.
You mentioned the over-the-counter aspect of these products, and some of your recommendations deal with education. Is it difficult to try to persuade people that something that they can buy over-the-counter or buy in a store is really damaging to them?
And that's really what I think the balance of our report, or the really big push behind it, is about educating. Because if there's one theme that we did hear a lot, is that kids, their parents, families, they think that because it's available in a retail setting, that it's not only legal but it's safe. And of course, we all know now that that's not the case on either point. So a fresh statewide educational approach targeting middle and high school students we thought was very necessary.
Your committee heard some horror stories about how synthetic drugs has affected loved ones. Did that help lawmakers move ahead a little faster, do you think?
We think it really sends a message home. If a particular legislator doesn't have this experience in their own community, or they're not familiar with the effects, you sure don't have to listen to very many of those stories before you realize that this is a big problem.
When this hits the legislature, do you imagine that it's going to be a bipartisan effort to get something passed, or is this something that people are going to be fighting about?
I don't think that you're going to see much fight over this one. We've worked really hard to try to develop recommendations that will be now formed into a bill that we think will have good support. We've worked with both caucuses in the House to try to garner support. We've worked with senators, and we've also worked with the governor's staff. So this will not be new to them. They kind of know it's coming, because we want to hit the ground, drop it as soon as possible, and pass it into law as soon as possible.
I'm sure lawmakers have been asked this question before, Eric. How do you stop synthetic drugs from coming into the country?
Well, there is the million-dollar question. What we're focusing on with this legislation is really stopping the retail sales on the street. But we also know that the next steps have to include dealing with sales over the internet. And really it's about supply and demand. As long as there's a demand for this product, people are going to find out a way to get it into the country.
Do you see a lot of evidence that internet sales are pretty robust in our state?
Right, and it's really hard to define what that, quantify what that amount is, but the testimony, and if you reach out, especially to college students, if you can find the ones that will talk to you, it's readily available, and they're doing it, and that's really the unfortunate part. But so we've got to not only pass what we're going to do here in the state, but we've also got to work with our federal delegation to come up with something about the internet sales.
What additional tools do lawmakers the police agencies need to really make arrests and prosecute?
Well, I think this tool with the Board of Pharmacy is going to be very helpful. We're also talking about a pilot program that will help to educate prosecutors around the state in how to prosecute these types of cases successfully. And the third piece of that is what we want to do is develop some expert witnesses. Because when you start talking about analog laws, you're really talking about products that mimic the effects of banned substances, right? So you need an expert to come in and be able to testify that the effects of this unknown drug are really the same as this known controlled substance. So we want to make sure that we put as much resources into developing this as we have to.
Now, in looking through some of your materials, it looked like you really looked at the chemical makeup of a lot of these drugs. And for parents out there, what is this stuff that you're talking about, and how do they recognize it in their homes and in their kids' behaviors?
I can't tell you how many times I hear that question, right? And one of the pieces of this educational approach is that the Department of Health is in the process of developing a website that will be specific to synthetic drugs, so that parents that have questions can go on, they can do reading, they can see pictures, they can get information. Right now, if you search the internet, it's really hard to find good real information. But they're going to develop this comprehensive website that's designed for parents to really get in there and interact, and kids as well too. But there needs to be a good resource where people can get information, because frankly these drugs that we're talking about are not typical street drugs that anybody's familiar with.
Right.
These are who knows what.
So has the Duluth medical community seen somewhat of a flow of people coming in on synthetic drugs?
There's been a
For
slowdown.
treatment?
There's been a significant slowdown.
After the Carlson case.
But we know that, and we've got some data now, because the UMD School of Pharmacy did some work with one of the local trauma centers here in Duluth. And we're getting some really rough data now, but we know that we're close to $400,000 to $500,000 a year of related costs to the treating this synthetic drug problem. That's just one trauma center, 1 year, one community.
Is synthetic marijuana worse than traditional marijuana?
It is, and it depends on the makeup, the chemical makeup, but it's studies will tell you that it's anywhere between 10 to 100 times worse than marijuana.
As far as its potency?
As far as its potency and as far as its effects that it has on individuals. It is nothing like marijuana.
Now, one of your colleagues, Representative Carly Moline, is going to be introducing a bill for medical marijuana in Minnesota. Duluth Police Chief Gordon Ramsey has opposed it, saying that in talking to law enforcement out in California where they have medical marijuana, that at the dispensaries there are similar issues to what we experienced in Duluth with the Last Place on Earth, with kind of unsavories hanging around outside, some transactions going on. Did this experience of studying the synthetic drugs perhaps make you any more likely to look at that issue more carefully or in a different light?
I think all of us on the committee agreed very early on that we really needed to separate those issues and deal with synthetic drugs on its own, and not try to link it to medical marijuana or legalizing recreational marijuana. So we have really tried to do that, and that's a whole separate question with a whole that's a separate issue. But synthetic marijuana, and frankly, we actually got in the habit of not calling it synthetic marijuana anymore, because it's nothing like marijuana. So we just call it synthetic drugs.
Are we seeing synthetic drugs trickling down to even younger people, as perhaps traditional drugs have done?
Yeah, I mean, I have testimony and statements from individuals 12, 13, 14 years old using synthetic drugs. And that's bad.
So you expect passage?
I do.
And then what?
And then what? Well, that's the thing. We're going to pass this law, and then we're going to go to work and make sure that everything is followed through on, especially this educational piece. I really want that to be in the schools no later than next fall. That's a very important piece, and we'll continue to review this every year and make sure that we're going to probably have to tweak some things, as we always do, but I want to make sure that we're making a good impact.
Okay. Representative, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you very kindly.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
Emergencies, they happen to everyone at some time and in varying degrees of severity. And if you don't have all the emergency phone numbers handy and have a hard time clearly explaining where you live, getting the help you need may be difficult. As of today, however, help is only 3 digits away.
911 is operational countywide. That means that people in all communities can dial 3 simple numbers for assistance.
That assistance is available to everyone because of a mass of volunteers, townships, and emergency officials logged every address and phone number, put up signs, and identified every road in the county. Then all the information was put into computers. When you make an emergency call, your name, address, and the nearest emergency response team, whether that be fire, ambulance, or police, comes up on the screens located here in the communications center. The dispatchers then relay that information to the appropriate emergency response team. Officials are asking the public to use the system only in emergency situations. And when you do use it, feel confident and be patient with operators handling your call.
They need to remain calm when they place a 911 call and let the dispatcher control the conversation and ask the questions.
Officials say the 911 project is another monument of cooperation. It's hoped that the system will speed up and simplify help to deal with the emergencies so common to life. John Gagnon, KDLH News.
If you want to see Olympic caliber skiing, you don't have to wait until the Olympics in Sochi, Russia. This weekend, the 36th annual Atmore Memorial Ski Race has lured big-time talent to Spirit Mountain here in Duluth. A couple of the competitors will travel on to the Olympics after this weekend's event, and many of the skiers have Olympic aspirations for the future. Joining us now is David Thickens, the Atmore Race Chair, and Warren Smith is a student at Dartmouth who will be skiing for the country of Estonia in the upcoming Olympics. Thank you both for being here. David, what do you think it is that lures such a competitive field to this event in Duluth?
That's a great question. We have a lot of history with this race. It's been going on now for 36 years, as you said, and it's really a cool thing that we get so many people coming from all corners of the country. Yeah. It is international. I think we have skiers representing 8 countries here this weekend. We've got skiers coming from New Hampshire to California. I think we've got a history of having good competition, putting on a really good race, and racers know that they can come here and put up good results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's kind of a secret. At least locally, a lot of people don't know about it.
It really, really is. I mean, Duluth is a hockey town for youth sports, but we've got a really great program at Spirit Mountain, and we've drawn a lot of people in to our race.
Yeah. Now, Warren, have you been to this race before?
This is actually my first time at the Atmore. I enjoy a lot coming to these smaller venues where it might be sort of more of a little niche community. That's where I grew up skiing, in a very small town. And the focus is definitely on ski racing up at Spirit, and that's really cool.
Now, Warren, you're going to be skiing for the country of Estonia. Do you have family ties to Estonia?
Yep, so my grandmother was actually born in Estonia, and she came over in the mid-1940s. And I've had citizenship since I was a very young boy.
I see.
And I was able to get it passed down from my grandmother to my mother and to myself.
Interesting. So you're going to be going to Russia this coming week. How do you prepare yourself 2 different ways, psychologically for the competition itself, and then psychologically for all the attention on security in Russia?
As far as the competition side, I would say that for example, coming to these races right now, getting in 3 good starts here at Spirit Mountain, and trying to get into that, trying to fine-tune that mental side of the game at the last minute before heading over to Sochi. And these are the last races that I have before heading to the Olympics. So I'm trying to, really find that mental, that right psychological state at the top of the course and on the way down.
Well, we're seeing you going down right now. It looks like you are pretty focused.
Yeah, it's definitely when you're in the moment, you're in the moment, and you gotta just try to keep the skis pointed as straight down the mountain as possible for the most amount of time, and that's usually what the winner ends up being able to do better than anyone else.
So do you even need to prepare for the security that's taking place over there?
Well, as far as the security goes, a lot of people have asked me that question, friends and elders and such, and the way I see it is that there's nothing that I can really do about the security, and we have to trust the Russians as much as possible, and which is a tough thing to do for many people, especially Estonians. But it's out of our hands as far as the athletes go.
Ski the best you can ski.
Yeah. So the more you worry about that, the less you're focused on what you're trying to accomplish there. So
good answer.
David, is it pretty common for the Atmore to attract this high level of athletes?
It is. I would say that this year is probably better than many in terms of the quality of the field that we've gotten in. But we have history over the years of having quite a number of athletes that have gone on to the Olympics or the World Cup. There was a young lady from Minnesota who was in our field last year who she's part of the U.S. ski team. She narrowly missed being named to the team racing in Sochi. She's young. I suspect that she'll be there 4 years from now. But we have a long history of having athletes that have moved on.
How do you attract all this high-level talent?
In terms of people like Warren, we just put on a good race and get a reputation among the coaches community, which across the country is fairly small at the highest levels of skiing, and they know that we put on a good race.
Being an International Ski Federation event, how big a deal is that for a community the size of Duluth and for a ski area like Spirit Mountain?
I think for Spirit Mountain it's really cool. There are really only across the entire Midwest 3 or 4 International Ski Federation events each year across, a 14-15 state area.
Yeah.
They're more common if you'll go to the bigger areas like Aspen or Vail, but it's a pretty big deal for a place like Spirit Mountain to host this.
Warren, I would assume snow conditions, hill conditions must mean a great deal. How are conditions there now this weekend?
Conditions at Spirit are pretty solid. David and I were actually just talking about it, and I'd say with the cold weather, it helps to compact the snow a little bit and suck the moisture out of the snow, which can make it a little bit of a firmer surface, which is very good for racing.
Sure.
Yeah, so the hill's in good shape for sure.
David, our winters go up and down. How does this year compare with past years?
Great snow.
It's great snow. Quite honestly, the cold has been tough. Our kids have lost a fair amount of training just because it has been so cold. The kids in our program are tough, but they train outside at night 3 and 4 nights a week.
Mother Nature's tough.
Mother Nature has been tough on all of us. I think we're all kind of looking forward to a little bit of a warm-up.
Now, you've mentioned the history of the event. Go into that a little bit more. Talk about how it started and the namesakes.
The race was started in the late 70s to honor 2 men with connections to Team Duluth and the ski community in Duluth. Dr. William Atmore and his son, Mark. Dr. Atmore was one of the founders of the Duluth Alpine Club, as it was called then. He was also president of our board. Very active in the ski community, and his son Mark was a talented racer and coach. Both died young, relatively young, in the mid-70s, and people from our community wanted to honor their memory and have held this race ever since to do that.
Warren, do you feel like this is a good warm-up for the Olympics?
Yeah, I think it totally is. There's, as David was mentioning, there's a high level of competition here. There's some really good guys that came in from Colorado, so it's really great to sort of test my speed just before heading over against them. And I think that for me, it's trying to get in a lot of race starts and find that fine mental edge, I guess, that I need to be on in order to compete at my highest. Is
the run here similar to what you'll find in Sochi in terms of maybe length and conditions?
I'd say at Sochi, the length of the run, it'll probably be, as far as the pitch, it'll probably be a little bit more challenging than it is here. Okay. Just because those mountains are very, very big. And the conditions in Sochi, I think it's a huge question mark. Europe actually at this point hasn't had a good snow year at all. It's been actually very warm, not so similar to these parts. It could be, for example, Vancouver was very, very wet snow because it was melting so fast. So it's hard to say at this point, conditions-wise, what it'll be like.
The Winter Olympics years, good news for those of you who are interested in skiing. Does it get a lot more people out and interested in calling?
I think so. How can it not? Especially now that the U.S. ski team has had some great success the last couple of years. We have seen a real growth in numbers. In fact, the girls outnumber the boys in youth ski racing right now, and I think we call it the Lindsey Vonn effect. For a long time, the World Cup and Olympic skiing was dominated by the Europeans. In the last couple of Olympics, the Americans have really come on, and I think it can only help to draw kids into our sport.
Yeah.
Now the public can come out this weekend.
Absolutely,
and watch?
The public can come out. There's no admission. If you want to just walk down and watch the racing, you're more than welcome to. Or if you want to do it from skis, Spirit Mountain would be more than happy to sell you a lift ticket and have kids come out and you can have some fun skiing and watch the racing.
What should they look for? What would they expect?
What would they expect? They'd expect to see great racers. They'd sit here and it's really, really an amazing athletic event to watch what these guys can do. They're hack skiers like us who are parents of kids in the program, and occasionally we'll get out there and try it. And I'm really just astounded at how good an athlete.
Warren, you've got a great time coming up. All the best to you.
Thank you.
All right,
will you also be cheering for the Americans?
I think I'm gonna. I have some friends in the American camp, so I'm gonna have to pull for them a little bit, and yeah.
And they for you.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Thank you both, guys.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Time now for the week's business news from Business North. U.S. Steel reported a massive loss of $2 billion in 2013. The Integrated Mining and Steel Company, which owns the Mintac and Keetac mines on the Iron Range, said the $2 billion was from a non-cash goodwill impairment charge and other non-cash expenses. The company's fourth quarter net loss was $122 million. At year end, U.S. Steel had $604 million of cash in hand and $2.3 billion of total liquidity.
Ashland Memorial Medical Center and Essentia Health have announced plans to build a new state-of-the-art cancer center in Ashland. Essentia has been providing cancer care services on the Ashland campus since 2002. The two healthcare organizations have been in ongoing discussions for several years about how they could collaborate to bring expanded cancer care services to the city of Ashland. The new $12 million facility will offer many of the same services provided at Essentia's Cancer Center in Duluth.
Contractor Kraus Anderson has received 4 awards of excellence from the Minnesota Construction Association for the company's work on the Duluth International Airport passenger terminal. The $77 million terminal opened 1 year ago. The Choice Award, which is the association's top honor, recognizes a project that features a resourceful blending of construction techniques with creative and visionary design. The 110,000 square foot airline passenger terminal utilizes sustainable green energy, including a geothermal heating system and numerous windows for natural lighting. For more on these and other business stories, visit businessnorth.com.
Now, if you have a comment on our program, this is the time to call. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message or send an email to Almanac North at wdsc.org and visit the WDSC website for news and information about the station, program information, and more. Well, Julie, Groundhog Day this weekend. Maybe the groundhog will see his shadow.
I don't know. I don't put much stock in the groundhog, but I like the whole idea of it anyway.
Yeah, it's still a lot of fun. All right, for Julie and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend, everybody, and be kind.